So here I have an image of the PDF that I've uploaded for you to give you some practice with labeling triads and seventh chords using a couple of different methods, one of which we're pretty familiar with by now from our discussion of triads and seventh chords, and then the other, the Roman numeral analysis, is going to take essentially those same processes, but then labeling the chords in a way to where we have a better sense of how they're functioning within provided key signatures. So we'll talk about the first method first, this RQI thing, where we identify the root of the chord. The label includes an indication of the quality of the chord as well as which inversion is presented in, especially when we're talking about chords that are not always going to be in root position. So this is the one that's pretty familiar to us. I've just given us a couple of examples. In the first one, for example, I've determined based on my analysis of this chord that the root is a D, right? And again, go back to the video where I talk about finding the roots in triads and seventh chords to see how I did that. When I restacked the notes, I realized that it's also a minor triad, but because it's in first inversion, I have to indicate that as well. And first inversion for triads is indicated by the figured bass symbol, the 6. Okay, so that's how I figured that one out. And then for the next chord, a seventh chord, this one's nice and already stacked in root position for us. So I can clearly see that the root is a G. The underlying triad of this seventh chord is major. And then the seventh is a minor seventh, and I go ahead and put a 7 because it is in root position. If it were inverted, then I couldn't use the 7. I'd have to use one of those other figured bass symbols that show us the inverted chords. Okay, so that's the process I use for that, and so I invite you to apply the same analysis to the other 4 chords here. And now we'll move down to the Roman numeral analysis. And when we use Roman numerals to identify or label chords, we're really showing 3 different things. We're showing the diatonic position of the chord within the key, and so of course in order to do Roman numeral analysis, we always have to be given the key that we're working in, otherwise then we don't really have the context for that. Okay, and of course the Roman numeral we're going to use is based upon the root of the chord in question. So what scale degree is that root? If that root is the 5th scale degree, then it's going to be some kind of a 5 chord, for example. Okay, so that's the first thing the Roman numeral tells us. It also tells us the quality of the triad. That includes both the basic triad as well as the underlying triad for a 7th chord. Okay, and just to recall, for Roman numerals we use a capital Roman numeral if the triad underneath is major, a lowercase Roman numeral if the triad is minor. Okay, and when we're dealing with augmented chords, augmented triads, we use capital, but then we also add the plus. And then for diminished triads underneath, we use the diminished symbol, and if it turns out that we're dealing with a 7th chord that is half diminished, we'll use that diminished symbol, but we'll be sure to put a slash through it as well. Okay, so that is the information that's provided to us by the Roman numeral. So I'll go ahead and walk through the first 2 examples I have here with you, and save the other 2 for you to work out on your own. So we can always start out by doing the root quality inversion thing just to see what chord we're looking at. So I'll do that here. I can see that I've got a nice root position triad. Turns out that it's a D. So it's a D triad, okay? Having seen this a number of times by now in my theory study and in your theory study, we can probably pretty quickly tell that it's a D minor triad. And because it's in root position, I don't have to add a figured bass symbol because a root position triad in the shorthand does not require a figured bass symbol. So it's a D minor triad, but I've only done part of my job because remember, I'm doing Roman numeral analysis, which means I have to tell you about this chord in the context of a key. Okay, well, what key is that? That's represented right here. So I want to talk about this D minor triad as it relates to the key of A minor. Okay, so I know that in A minor, D is the 4th scale degree. And so since I have a chord built on that 4th scale degree, it's going to be some kind of 4 chord. So I know I'm going to need the Roman numeral 4. Now the only question is it an uppercase or a lowercase? Well, because it's a minor triad, I'm going to use a lowercase. Okay, and again, I don't need any figured bass symbols here because it's just in root position. Okay, so that is how I'm going to analyze that first chord. It's just a 4 chord within the key of A minor. Okay, and for the next one, I've gone ahead and used a 7th chord, but I want to figure out this 7th chord in the context of E flat major. Because of my method for finding roots, I can pretty quickly see the 2nd here in my closed position 7th chord, and because of that 2nd, I know that the upper note must form the root. Okay, so I know that the D is the root of the chord. Maybe these don't come to me quite as quickly, so I'll go ahead and create my stack. D is the root, F should be the third, there it is, and an A of some kind should be the fifth. Yep, sure enough, there's an A flat, and a C of some kind will be the chordal seventh, and there's our C. All right, so here we go. D to A flat, that's a diminished triad. I'm sorry, diminished fifth. The D to the F is a minor third, so it's a D diminished something, but I just have to figure out the seventh, right? So D to C is a minor seventh. Okay, so let's see. What does that tell me? Oh, right. That's the long form of talking about a half diminished seventh chord. But remember, I have to account for the inversion. The bass note or the bottom note of the stack is an F, and since F is the third of my chord, it's going to be in 6/5 position. So it's a D half diminished 6/5. But again, I'm not done yet because I have to talk about that particular chord within the key of E flat major. Okay, so that means I need to figure out, okay, well, where is D in the lineup for the key of E flat major? Turns out that it's the seventh scale degree. So this is going to be some kind of seven chord, right? And because that underlying triad is in fact diminished, I know I'm safe in using a lowercase 7, okay? And then I still need to indicate the fact that it's diminished. It's actually half diminished as a seventh chord, and then I can keep the Roman numeral thing the figured bass thing I already figured out. So this is a 7 half diminished 6/5 in the key of E flat major. Okay, so go ahead and apply that same process to the remaining chords provided in this row here. Okay, and then go ahead and keep working on these last three that I've provided here for you. And here you're going to be able to use both systems, both the root chord inversion approach as well as the Roman numeral analysis. And for that, I want you to see what I've done here, okay? So I'd like you to start with each of these three chords by identifying the root, quality, and inversion, and that's going to give us kind of just the abstract label for the chord. In other words, just the chord all by itself. What is that, right? But then we're going to contextualize these chords in three different keys per chord. So for example, in the first one, I want you to tell me about this chord as it relates to C major. So that's going to be one Roman numeral. It's going to take on a different Roman numeral because a chord of this kind plays a different role in F major than it does in C major, right? It's a different scale degree, and it plays a different role in the key of A minor. So I want you to give me the root, the chord, and the inversion here, and then for each of these other three, the Roman numeral that's appropriate to it. Now, one thing you'll notice is the inversion piece of this will not change. The quality piece of this will not change because it's the same set of notes, right? So if it's minor, it's always going to be minor. If it's major, it's always going to be major, diminished, whatever. But what will change will be the Roman numeral you attach to that in all the different key contexts. Okay, so hopefully that helps in guiding your work on this sheet for practice.